In this session, we will be discussing a subject of importance to students, practitioners of cinema alike. The subject is how to write a film review. Going by the poor standard of film reviewing in this country, we might as well be discussing the subject put this way: how not to write a film review. Film reviewing does not have a long or noble tradition in this country. The likes of Amita Malik or Chidananda Dasgupta, who did some very important film reviewing in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and a part of the 90s, that kind of standard is conspicuous by its absence in the present diminished times. Now let us see, how does a typical film reviewer go about his task in this country? They rely heavily and of course disastrously on the synopsis provided to them after a closed-door screening, so to say, for a handful of so-called critics. When they sit down to write, half of a review or even 3/4 will be outright filched from the synopsis provided by the producers. And then the last quarter of the review will typically mention in stereotypical language things like how the music was, how the camera behaved, etc. etc. Now that is not the way to write a review. It may bring a critic's name in print, it may fill his purse a little, but it will certainly not contribute to film students understanding the nuances of cinema. Now there is a widely held impression in this country that practically every art form, save film, requires the critic to do a long period of apprenticeship, so to say. Now what do I mean by apprenticeship? It is said that a literary critic must read so many books of different types over a period of time, and then only he earns the spurs, to say, to go into print. A music critic has to attend so many functions, so many occasions to hear classical musicians perform or even modern musicians perform before they're given an opportunity to write in the papers. Similar is the case with art critics. But somehow the impression has gained ground that film is so easy to understand and even easier to write about that anybody, any Tom, Dick or Harry can write on it without what we call the necessary preparation. This accounts for the poor standard of film criticism in this country. I would say that film is too important an art form to be left to the charlatans, to the imposters. Only a person who has seen hundreds of films made in different styles, employing different aesthetics, and who understands the genres of cinema, whether a film is a documentary or it falls in the category of drama, is it an experimental, or is it a fusion of one or more, two or more of these genres? What is a crime thriller? What is a biopic? Now, these are questions that one can answer to oneself only after years of reading the books, seeing the films, discussing the subject with practitioners of cinema and the maestros in the different categories, like the directors. You have to talk to cinematographers and have at least a working knowledge of what the camera is all about, the lighting, the movements, the lens to be used. The lenses used have a life of their own. In a certain situation where a story is being told, a narrative is unfolding, why is it that an ace director uses a certain kind of lens? Now, these are things that have to be understood. What are the essentials, the barest essentials of editing? Why does one use a certain musical score in a certain situation? How does one indicate an approaching storm in a relationship? Music contributes to that. Now, these things have to be discussed, read, understood, and then only is someone ready, should be ready to write in a newspaper or appear on television in a program devoted to film appreciation. These things we have to consider. So how not to write? That is, don't try to fool yourself. Don't bluff your readers. Don't cheat them. And thereby don't cheat yourself. Don't play games of deception with the daily readers who expect to know about a certain film. They want to know both the negative and the positive things that this man may have to say, the writer may have to say about the film. There are still very serious viewers who make a decision to buy a ticket to a certain screening, to a certain film, based on reading a review. These are things that one must keep in mind. To be an effective film critic, a film reviewer, one must have a working knowledge of a whole lot of other art forms, because film, to my mind, and to the mind of many exalted people before me, cinema is a complete art in the sense that first it takes from a whole lot of other art forms and then brings them together. Not just art forms, but many disciplines also, like history, politics, psychology, anthropology. And here the art forms: music, literature, theater, painting. For a reviewer to do his work properly, he or she must necessarily have at least a working knowledge of each of these art forms and each of these disciplines, and then only he'll be able to assess the work of an important director in its totality. Now, you may say that, but that will take a whole lot of time. Well, yes, anything done in a hurry will necessarily be second-rate at best. And only those who really understand cinema, understand it as an art form and as a vehicle of social communication, should be given the opportunity to write in the newspapers, to do film reviewing. Now, this has to be clearly understood, that film reviewing cannot be an instant activity like making instant coffee. You just can't do this. A film reviewer, in his own way, is also an artist. He is trying to assess seriously a film, and then when he puts pen to paper, things must be put down in such a way that the readers will be immediately attracted to it. A film reviewer must also have his own writing style. He should know how to start a film review, and then what, like every well-written essay, what should be the middle of his piece and how he should conclude it. Telling the story is only a part of the activity. So you should keep the telling of the tale to the barest. Just a couple of sentences. And then you get to the style and to the aesthetics, and then the technical part of the exercise. And I think thereby the reviewer will be immediately attracted not only to the reviewer's style of writing, his way of putting things, but will also be interested in going to the cinema hall and seeing it. Now you may say, but the cinema halls have disappeared. Yes, but everywhere there are still a few still standing. They will go there. Or if that film is shown on television, they'll be on the lookout for it. And when it is shown, they'll see it. So the curiosity of the viewer has to be aroused by the writing that the reviewer does. This is something very important. So I've told you how not to write a review, how to go about the business of writing a review. These should be very clearly understood, these things. You know, a reviewer is not only of help to the viewer, but he can often be a help to the directors also. There are directors who often want to know what a serious reviewer is saying about his latest work. And therefore, the reviewer should not think that I'm just writing for a group of readers. There are many people who, beyond the readership of a newspaper, there are many people who may not be keeping a certain newspaper all days of the week. But on a certain day, there are very important film people who take a certain newspaper on a certain day, the day reserved for reviews to appear. That way, you know, they are also benefited by the suggestions, by the remarks, by the critiquing of reviewers whom they respect. Respect cannot be earned by shortcut methods. It has to be earned with a lot of perspiration. As in every other field of human endeavor, Here the rules are the same. If the reviewer tries to do things in a slipshod manner, the average reader is so intelligent that he can easily see through the games that the reviewer is playing. And once the reviewer loses respect, once the reader loses respect in a reviewer's criticisms, that can be said to be the end of the career of a certain person as a critic, a reviewer, or whatever, an appreciator, whatever you have to call it. I think this session was necessary, is necessary. Such a session will always be necessary because there's a tendency to write off cinema, which is the youngest of all art forms, as a pariah activity. Oh, cinema, it doesn't come up to the standards of literature, theatre, music, or painting, which is thousands and thousands of years old. So what? The reviewer, the self-respecting reviewer, should keep on asking himself and also should keep on asking his audience, so what? But this is the youngest and the most complete art. You may call it a bastard art, not having a life of its own, but it has been repeatedly proved by the greatest masters of cinema how this is a complete art, taking a little from here and there and then synthesizing it with the personal genius of the director. He comes up with something memorable as the early cave paintings, as memorable as the first sounds made in a somewhat musical manner, some kind of ancient music that may have been produced by the earliest caveman in order to put his naughty child to sleep. So one must be prepared to take up the cudgels for this youngest art form, but that confidence needed to do that will be possible only after the practitioner on the one hand, the reviewer on the other, both are equipped in a very, very positive way. Now, I would like to bring to the notice of this class at least two persons in the annals of Indian cinemas who combined in themselves substantial knowledge relating to different art forms. Satyajit Ray and Ritik Ghatak. Very dissimilar figures as directors, but what united them was their knowledge of different art forms, which ultimately culminated in the films they made, some of them the true classics of Indian and world cinema. Ray was an artist, he was a musician, he understood Western music, he understood both also classical Hindustani music. He used to attend theatre sessions. He could write and had a profound knowledge of world and Indian and Bengali literature. All this helped him in the costuming he did, in the dialogues he wrote. Though he was helped out by others, the ultimate say was always his. Similarly, Ghatak, a writer of short stories, then he comes to the theatre. He writes plays, adapts plays written by others, he acts himself, he attends to the props, the sets. Then later on, when he comes to films, he puts all of these together and produces classics like Ajantrik or Meghadakatara. Now, these are two examples from Indian cinemas that I have given. If you travel further, you come across people like Fellini or Kurosawa or Ettore Scola, people who did a lot of sketching, drawing, painting as an accompaniment to their scripts. Some of them were aware of theatre native to their respective lands. So you find that you cannot have a complete filmmaker making a complete film unless he or she has delved into different art forms whilst preparing themselves for the ultimate leap to be a filmmaker. In that same vein, as I had told you earlier, a reviewer must also prepare for himself or herself for a total experience of writing, so that he or she can refer to a certain passage, let's say, which has dreamlike qualities, painterly qualities, or where the music is used to create a certain frame of mind, to create an exercise, an atmosphere on the screen, which has a profound influence on the viewer's appreciation of that sequence, that shot, or the film in its totality. Now, these things are very essential for us to understand. It cannot come about in just 1 or 2 years. You have to give a reviewer at least 10 years, a film reviewer, at least 10 years to prepare himself in the role of for the role of a believable, credible, respectable reviewer. Now, these things are easier said than done, but that is the way it has to be done. Anything worth doing is worth doing well. Right from the ancient times, our teachers, the highest of artists, they have been telling humankind this, and yet we do not take that prescription with the seriousness it deserves. The 10 years or so that I prescribed as a preparatory period. Now, there is no rule that it must be 10 years. There are, of course, exceptional people. After maybe 4 or 5 years, there are certain reviewers who start writing rather interesting reviews, and later on with time they grow even better. But from my long experience in the field of film reviewing, I have found that it should be 8 to 10 years, a period, when you keep on seeing films, attending film society sessions, because that's one place which is not as vibrant today in India as it used to be, but that is one place where you get to meet many like-minded people, many knowledgeable people about cinema, and through the discussions you come to understand a lot of things, the nuances, the details, the important details that otherwise escapes our eye. So this period is very necessary to prepare ourselves, and only then will we be able to do a beautiful activity like film reviewing, responsible film reviewing, with the seriousness it deserves. I think it is on that note that I will end this session, and I'd still say that if anyone wishes to become a film reviewer, he or she should be prepared for an initial period of struggle. Even sometimes when the remarkable critic writes something important, that piece may go unnoticed, but that is no reason to feel discouraged. In course of time, if someone has real substance, dum, in him or her, it is going to be noticed by the best of readers. It's going to be talked about, and ultimately it will help a whole array of people in the film business to benefit.